As Christians, we often complain that Muslims take our scriptures out of context. But are we being generous enough with their arguments? Let's find out by trying to make one of them work. In the following clip, Zakir Hussain makes the following argument.
Now we know in history there were Christians who maintained that it was actually Simon of Cyrene who died on the cross and not Jesus. Mark chapter 15. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought him to the place called Golgotha. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, dividing up his clothes. They cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. Who is the him referring to in these passages? It is clearly referring to Simon of Cyrene.
The word him is, in fact, used exclusively in the Greek of the section he reads, and never Jesus' name, as some English translations may indicate. So, according to Hussein's argument, the traditional view of Jesus' death should be replaced with something like this.
Let me shoulder your burden, brother.
Oh, thank you.
Hey!
Hey! What are you doing?
It's not my cross.
Shut up and get on with it!
Now, a Christian will immediately object that his argument takes our scriptures out of context. They would point out, for example, that Jesus prophesied his death in Mark 8:31 and in Mark 9:31 and in Mark 10:33 and in Mark 10:45 and finally in Mark 14 verses 22 through 25. But remember, even though Jonah prophesied the destruction of Nineveh, God relented and spared that city. And Jesus did pray in the Garden of Gethsemane that God would relent and spare him. So obviously Jesus, who elsewhere compared himself to Jonah, was also spared. But how did this switcheroo take place between Jesus and Simon? Well, clearly, Jesus was transfigured to look like Simon, and Simon was transfigured to look like Jesus. After all, Jesus was transfigured in Mark chapter 9, which foreshadowed how Jesus would escape his crucifixion in chapter 15. But some might ask, did their voices change? Did their clothes also transfigure? Did the crown of thorns dissolve from Jesus' head and reappear on Simon's? Did Jesus' bruises and scars heal from his body and then appear on Simon's body? The answer to all of these questions is yes. In fact, it's so obvious this is what happened that Mark didn't want to waste the reader's time including any of these details. But wouldn't the crowd notice them transfiguring when it happened? And wouldn't the Romans wonder why Jesus was carrying his cross again when they had just given it to Simon? Not if everyone was momentarily blinded. After all, that's how Lot escaped the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know this interpretation is correct because in the other Gospels, Jesus compares Jerusalem to Sodom and Gomorrah. And so, when the Romans regained their sight, they would have just assumed that Jesus had taken up his cross again. Some might argue, if Jesus was rescued, why does he cry out in verse 34 in both the English and the Greek, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And why does he go on to die in both the English and the Greek in verse 37? Doesn't Islam teach the death of Jesus occurs 40 years after his second coming? The answer is very straightforward. Immediately after Simon took the cross, Jesus ascended alive into heaven. Now this is where things get interesting. Because we perceive time as linear, we believe that the future happens after the past. But time is actually circular, so that what appears to us to be our future can also be our past. And so Jesus' second coming is so far in the future that it actually occurs 40 years before the events of our passage. That means our passage actually shows us Jesus dying at his still future second coming. You need scriptural proof of this? What does the Hadith say Jesus will do at his second coming? He kills the pigs. And what did Jesus do in Mark chapter 5? You guessed it, he killed the pigs. This is clear scriptural evidence that the second coming of Jesus overlaps in the timeline of the first coming of Jesus. Kind of like what happened to Captain America in Avengers Endgame.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
So Mark could not have been clearer that it was Simon of Cyrene who was crucified in the place of Jesus. Except in Mark 15:21, the Greek doesn't read.
And they forced him to carry the cross.
It actually reads that he might carry the cross of him. And since Jesus is the him in verse 21 and not Simon, that makes Jesus the him in all the verses that follow.
Go!
And this is confirmed in Mark 16:6, when the angel at the tomb says in both English and the Greek that Jesus was the one who was crucified.
No!
Oh well, we tried.